This video is sponsored by Thomas Brush and his course Full-Time Game Dev. Get a big discount using the link in the description. More on that right at the end.
Hey guys, and welcome back to Blackthornprod. I'm Liam, Noah's brother. We are currently working on a Steam game called Olobolo, a fun deathmatch experience that blends football and magic. Since the last Olobolo devlog, we focused our efforts on creating a single player mode for our game, where you can play versus waves of enemy creatures. At its core, Olobolo is a party deathmatch game, but with COVID still a big deal in most countries, meeting up with friends isn't always easy. Hopefully, players will be able to try the game using Steam Remote Play together, but if that doesn't work properly, at least they'll have a very fun solo alternative. Your goal as a player is to score goals into the enemy cores and reduce them to 0, while keeping your core safe and avoiding vicious enemies that try to damage you. So we began by recreating the player controller and pick up and shoot mechanics. We could have reused the same scripts as the versus mode, but to be honest, they are quite messy, and so we prefer to refactor the codes and avoid problems. Now that we had our player moving around and shooting white balls at the enemy core, it was time to create the first enemy. So we created the simple bat that follows the player around. To defend ourselves, we created our first power, which was this rocket. A very satisfying projectile that destroys all enemies in its path. At first, we created the spiky projectile power like for the versus mode of the game, but we quickly came to realize that it was quite unsatisfying to only destroy one meager bat at a time, hence the big rocket. Now that we had one enemy and one power to defend ourselves, I wanted to put into place the whole enemy wave system. So I created this cool little script that does just that. You can create as many waves as you want. Each wave has an array of enemies that can spawn during that wave. So for now, we only have our bats. Then, we can also tweak the number of enemies in the wave and the frequency at which enemies get spawned. We also made it so that the last wave repeats itself indefinitely until the player successfully reduces the enemy core to 0. With all the main mechanics into place, it was now time to create lots of different enemies and powers. To me, this was really the most fun part. Let's start off with the enemies. We have the fast bat, which is simply, as the name suggests, a stronger bat that flies much faster towards the enemy. Then we made the bat spawner. This enemy runs to a random position on the map and then spawns bats every so often. It's really important to destroy this enemy quickly before you get overwhelmed by all the bats in the scene. Of course, we needed to make an enemy that targets directly our core and tries to score goals. So we made this enemy that does just that. He moves towards our core, and if you aren't able to kill him on time, he will reduce your core by 1 point. Next off, we've got the splitter. This pesky little monster divides himself into 2 when you kill him. It's essentially 3 monsters in 1. Then, one of my favorites is this mage character. He either shoots out fireballs that hurts the player or ice balls that freeze him. A very strong foe. We also have the monstrous block, which is a slow but more robust enemy that has 2 health. After that, we created the Hummingbird Shooter, a vicious enemy that shoots out projectiles that follows the player around. We then made the Mamalupa, which is an enemy that explodes when she dies, so you need to be careful not to kill her at a near range or else risk to get caught in the explosion. Finally, we have my favorite enemy, the Poison Puff. When he touches a player character, you'll get poisoned and have this very annoying green goo all over your screen. He also explodes into a poison bomb when he dies, so you've got to try and destroy him from a distance. Now let's talk about the powers that we created to combat these enemies. The Heart lets us heal 1 point when we shoot it at our core. The Freeze power lets us freeze enemies, which gives us some nice breathing time during the match. La Bomba is an incredibly powerful but rare power that simply destroys all the enemies. It's so satisfying to pick up one of these when you're in a very difficult situation and see all the enemies vanish before your eyes. Finally, the Laser power equips your player with a small laser for a few seconds. Because the laser has a very short range, this is more of a melee weapon. Now that we had most of the enemies and powers put into place, it was time to start creating different levels. This is really the hardest part in my opinion. The main challenge is to not make the game too hard. We always have a tendency to make the games we develop too challenging. Since we are the developers, it always seems easy to us. So my advice is to make the game feel a little too easy for you. And of course, playtest with the most people possible. With that in mind, I started blocking out a few levels. I just focus on tweaking what waves of enemies there will be, and the overall composition of the levels. For example, there will be some levels with multiple enemy cores, some with permanent hazards on the arena, and even some levels with goalkeepers that make it that much harder to score goals. Noah will of course need to go over these levels and make them much prettier later on.
If you like the look of this project, please consider wishlisting it on Steam. It will mean the world to us. This video was sponsored by my buddy Thomas Brush and his online course, Full-Time Game Dev. He's been making indie games for pretty much every platform for the last decade, including his latest game Neversong on Nintendo Switch and Steam. Thomas had to grind to bring in enough income to secure 6 figures a year to support his family and studio. He let me try out his latest project, a comprehensive online platform called Full-Time Game Dev, with over 1,500 students. And there's just so much to learn here. Not only will you actually make 2D and 3D games from scratch, from art to programming and design, you'll also learn how to successfully launch and make money from your creation, and potentially do it full-time. But what I really love about this course is that you'll learn about publishers, crowdfunding, building a personal brand, marketing, bundles, and a strategic method to securing a slot on the Steam front page. Thomas is giving the first 20 students a massive discount for his course, 40% off. These coupons usually get snatched up really quick because this is an extremely generous deal. So to get a massive discount, simply use the link in the description and begin your game dev journey. Thanks for watching. Cheers.